Hey everyone, when they're here, and today we're going to be looking at the new breeze changes that Valorant just tweeted out not too long ago, and how that changes the overall dynamic of this map from attack sided to more so defender sided post change. With that being said, we're also going to be just doing a quick review on all of these changes, my ideas for how comps will sort of change once we get this map in the map pool, and how the overall map pool seems to be changing going forward with the removal of Pearl and also Fracture. So, with that, let's jump right into the changes here. So, we have immediately right off the bat a mid change. So, as mentioned, if I pull up Epic Pen, this map used to be heavy attack sided. Mid, you could not contest. You would face up Pop Flash from KO. There's Sova darts that landed everywhere. There's a KO knife that would land everywhere. Mid was essentially a ghost town for defenders. It was just so attack sided. You had like an early elbow peek, if anything, but you were just so caught out if you chose to do it. There were Viper walls that existed through mid. It just wasn't really something as a defender that you could actively fight for. And now post change, you can slightly still fight for mid. There's still darts you can throw and knives you can throw per normal to kind of stall out the push, but there's a lot more room for defenders to equally work with. And the reason for that is the angle of the box here changed, allowing smokers or anyone other than a orb smoker or uh, however you want to call it, your brimstones, your omens, your astras, I refer to them as orb smokers. But now there's room for them to actually smoke off mid. Doesn't require a wall smoker to do it. And there's some new sort of ratty type positioning, lurky positioning that you can do bottom mid to get early peak advantage, have someone hold you. You can actually have an opper hold mid effectively, or if you have someone hold halls with an opper holding the bottom mid walk down, there's just a lot more potential for defenders to work with. So I think most of the changes mid here favor attacker, but there's equally some room given to defenders as well. And it's not such a huge change compared to other parts of the map. Now, the next site we have is B. And personally, I'm in agreement with a lot of people that I really don't think there's an issue with this site. I think there was a lot of flexibility between how attackers could approach, along with how retake worked. Obviously, if you got sort of pinned back site, there was a problem, but high end teams usually had a late relurk through mid, or they had lineups set up from B main to where you weren't forced to really stay on site. There were retake flashes from KO that would pop above ladder, list goes on. I think this change actively promotes defenders like way more than it should, because now at this point you could sort of route the way the map was played to where like a Viper would be, and attackers have flexibility in scaling. But now, if an attacker scales back site, depending on Sentinel utility, they're sort of pinned back here with no real route to fight or help their team on site. So I feel like this change was targeted towards maybe post plant positioning to make it less restrictive in terms of where people in post could play, but I think the adverse effect is it heavily promotes the defender setups. Now, the other option I sort of considered too is initially on this map, Sentinels were kind of falling off. Like Cypher was the only one that really could be played. You saw some Sages casually, you saw some Killjoys casually, but at the higher level, it was mostly Chamber, which isn't really a true Sentinel, and then Cypher. So I feel like this change was sort of to allow ciphers or sentinels to have more room, because now you can trip off ladder. Now you can put like a one-way screen here, trip the opposite side of site the same way, or trip your mid entrance, and you actually have a lot more room to work with as a sentinel player. It's not just play Viper because sentinels just get clowned on anyway. Like there's room for you to make your movement and your utility worth it, which could be the other change Riot wanted. Maybe Riot wasn't a fan of how little Sentinels were initially getting picked on this map, and this maybe opens that back up for them. The next change is this Halls change where it's completely cut off. I love this change. It still allows defending teams to early Sova Dart mixed with a KO knife in a main to get immediate early info. And on top of that, it also allows late round options for the attacking side to keep the defenders honest, because this angle allows a team to hold switch and doesn't just let switch be a free approach and a free pick, while also constraining the attacking side from having 15 different options on how they actually want to hit A. Don't have any issue with these changes. There were players that talked about the scaffolding possibly being broken. That's not the case. It's the same exact scaffolding that they use on Icebox, actually. Ignore all this, my old drawings. But it's the same exact scaffolding they use here. And obviously there's a hole in the floor, but you can't break this scaffolding at all. So it is what it is. So back to our fun stuff here. Next we go into A Cave, and I think this was the biggest defended side or defensive sided change that they've done. I mean, they talked a little bit on main here. So this box changing, like mentioned, allows controllers to actually smoke this off, actively fight for it. There's a few other kind of nifty options that you can do mid as well, but I'll hold that for later. And then back to this A Cave change. So this change, I think, is the most defender-sided change they've made on this whole map. Removing caves as an option entirely and only feeding A main into this single entrance. There's potential for an Omen one way to sit here. You could paranoia, you can stun. You can immediately get control of this A main positioning and essentially stall out the attacking side from scaling up to any degree, where they have to use util or they have to split. And I think that this change is probably the most significant change out of anything, because now, not only in the early round can you contest this space, but in the mid round, you can get someone positioned on this box and have that essentially be working info for the rest of your team. They can then scale out later depending on information they have, because initially, when you tried to fight for early A main control, you got stuck right here. And either the flash would kind of give it away that you're in this position, and a team would just hard clear you, shoot this box, or the players coming out of A main would equally clear you, and it was just a really tough position to be in. So now that position will always be a threat. Like, you always have to respect this off util, but just the fact that you can early smoke this, flash down, stun down, install any push is going to be crazy advantage for defending teams. And then lastly, the A site changes. I don't think anything's really crazy here. They made it taller so chambers can't just trip and have an absurd off angle anymore. I think that's fine. We'll have to see how the rest of this sort of plays out. It might be a little bit easier for you to safely plant with them being slightly taller too. So what does this mean for the game? Well, here's the current map. So like originally you had Viper walls, like this wall, which I hated, that people saw pro teams run but didn't understand why this is bad. To where some teams would either adjust here, or a wall I actually loved was going mid and walling all of backside off and taking this kind of mid split positioning. I loved this wall. So that might be something that changes with the new routing. I think the B wall relatively stays the same. I don't think there's anything significant that changed about B to not make this be the better wall. You just need another piece of utility to deal with all of backside as you are on your general approach. And then with the mid changes, we'll just go to my second diagram here. So with these mid changes, you now have a lot more room to work with, right? So the wall I love actually gets a lot more value now because of this mid changes for attackers, and it allows you to scale properly and split properly into sight. And I think that there's high odds that this might be a defaulted wall going forward versus this wall, because I don't really think that this wall provides you advantage unless you have two wall controllers. So you're running a harbor to kind of split and double split off sight lines and stuff. But with that, like, even if we go to like an orb controllers can now smoke all of this off if they want to. We can smoke all of main off and force them into a choke. B, like I said, is still relatively straightforward. Their main job would be like smoking back sight. And then mid, you have this option to now completely smoke mid off and allow yourself to cross through. So the changes just open up the ability, right? And if I had to split up advantage, like I said, on A, I think it's heavy attacker advantage now with, or heavy defender advantage with little attacker advantage, if not none. I think the same is the case on B at first glance, where you have heavy defender advantage, little attacker. And then I think for mid, I think it's relatively even, where the attackers might have just a little bit more advantage, but I think this is the closest you can get. So where mid used to be a complete attacker friendly sided, like there was almost no advantage at all for defenders. It's even, but that came at the cost of both A and B becoming more defender sided because of it. So it'll be interesting how this plays out in terms of, especially after we get meta adjustments. As for team comps, as you can see here, I think it's relatively straightforward. Viper 2, I think the Viper Harbor is what you'll probably see at a baseline level at all ranges, even in like high level ranked. That usually changes a little bit on ladder with more orb smokers, but I think orb smokers have a lot more potential now than they did before. We talked about getting all of a main control. Your usual 2 initiators with a duelist, and this is assuming no Sky changes. So if Sky gets adjusted, the flexibility in this changes. But right now, this is what my baseline prediction is. And then down here are my question marks. I think Chamber is relatively straightforward. I think he still retains somewhat the same value, if not gets a little bit more value, because he can early trip a main because he can early trip a main, and any combination of utility allows him to peek, safely teleport out. His teleports B don't really change. You can get probably a lurk teleport mid somewhere. So Chamber, I think, is relatively straightforward there. Yoru, I think, is the same way, if not gets a little bit more value because of the way his teleport works and giving him freedom to actually move around the map without being overly exposed. Killjoy, I still think maybe is an option on B, but her ult is still awful everywhere else. So I don't really think you'll see that many Killjoys. Cypher, I think, is the Sentinel you'll see on choice a lot more on B, just due to the different screens and trip setups he can do. Neon's potential, I think, is really high, especially with the combination of her wall and her stun, especially for B takes. It allows you another kind of wall controller to a degree, where she can easily just split sight with her fast lane in combination of controller utility to work out wherever you need to go. And then Deadlock is kind of my wild card, where if they buff her sensor and her GravNet at all, I think her value on this map increases tenfold. And I think it's the same for any other map, because her barrier mesh just has so much potential in so many key parts of this map now with these changes. You can't like do any like crazy lineups, but just the sites of reference that you can cut off in combination with any smoke utility is just, it skyrockets. If they just buffed a little bit of the other aspects of her kit and they take down Sky a little bit with it, I think you'll see this agent rise in a little bit more comps than you would normally. So, what does that mean for our map pool? Well, currently, we have Haven, Lotus, Split, Pearl, Bind, Ascent, and then Fracture's like a flex map. And they're getting rid of Pearl, and they're getting rid of Fracture, right? So afterwards, that leaves us with still Haven and Lotus for our 3-site maps. That leaves us with Split, Bind, and Ascent for our sort of close quarters, tighter maps in terms of sight lines and angles to deal with. And then that leaves Breeze as our sort of larger map. And I think Sunset is equally going to be another larger style map, similar to Breeze. I don't think there's going to be any crazy like niche mechanic on this map. I think it's just going to be a larger scale map, because if that's the case, then we have a somewhat sort of balanced map pool between the 3-site maps, the closer maps, and then our longer range maps. And I think that's really healthy long term. And I do have a strong feeling that the Breeze changes are intended for this map to be in the map pool for the foreseeable future. And then if I had to guess maps that would probably be rotated out next, I could see Ascent leaving in the future for Pearl to come back, and then I can see the return of the fan favorite Icebox to sort of have this like even split across the board. And then they would bench Ascent for whatever future changes, because there's just like a little baby change, but I think they'd want to take Ascent out of the pool if Pearl came back, and or Split. I could see Split leaving again too to get more significant changes, but this way the map pool stays consistent and it provides options for teams to deal with when they're working on strats and more. So with that being said, that's it for me today. This is a quick one, just talking about my insights on what I feel will happen with Breeze and more. If you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like, a comment, hit the subscribe button. All of that helps me tremendously. And of course, follow me on my socials, Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter, and my Twitch. Twitch, I normally stream every day, but I think I'm going to focus a little bit more on my YouTube going forward. But still, shoot me a follow on both. Join the Discord. Stay updated when I do go live or when I do post more videos. And as always, I appreciate you all taking your time to watch this. And you guys have a great rest of your day. And let's hopefully get a nice Champions finals and grand finals to wrap up this weekend before we head into the next act. You guys have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you next time when they're out.